Hello and welcome back to JLXP. World's semifinals, they came oh so fast. We had 4 straight days of quarterfinals, right into GenG versus KT, and I had already written in pencil that GenG was going to be in the finals. I was probably giving them, just in the back of my head, like a 75% chance of winning Worlds outright from this slot. And my goodness, was I wrong? KT beats them 3-1 and goes to their first finals ever. If you didn't watch the whole thing live, I would recommend going to, when they toss to the analyst desk, just listening to the emotion in Emily Rand's voice after the series, because she has been a KT fan for 13 years, and this is greater heights than they've ever reached, so it's really a massive moment. And they have a legitimate shot of winning the world title because they just knocked out the tournament favorites. They're going to be playing the winner of T1 versus TES, who are teams that definitely have flaws, much like KT was a team with many flaws going into Worlds. And they're 3 wins away. So it's just crazy. It really is hard to wrap my head around all this. Like I've been doing the last several podcasts, I have a number of points. This one is a little bit history heavy. I do have draft breakdown, and I also have some gameplay breakdowns. I have one clip from all 4 of the games where I feel like GenG lost a little bit of control. I've also seen some comments online. I mean, I saw a ton of comments online of people just dogging on Chovy. I even sent out a tweet before the series, not really thinking he would lose, that, he has everything. His resume is complete outside of the world champion stamp that legitimizes all of the previous accomplishments. But without that stamp, his accomplishments are so attackable. And you can call him choky. And my God, dude, did people do that? Have people been doing that? Everything about how great they've been, yet how bad they've been in the biggest moments under the brightest lights, is just getting amplified to no end. So I don't really know where Chovy and GenG go from here, other than just turning off all social media, taking a vacation, and grinding it back out next year once again. That's for a future episode, but it did get me thinking, point number 1, in World's history, this expectation that the favorites are going to win the World Championship, that is why they're the favorites. But I just wanted to kind of reassess how often that ends up being true. How hard is it actually for the best perceived team to win this month-long tournament against 15 of the other best teams in the entire world? And I think the start of this tournament really set the expectation that the favorites would win. And I'm going to go all the way back to 2013. I know Worlds happened in 2011 and 2012, but I feel like the modern-ish Worlds era would have started around 2013 because Korea didn't even have their own server until the very end of 2012, when they nearly won Worlds anyway and were already the favorites in the finals before losing. So, 2013, I think the favorites won. I think even though Faker was super young, it was expected that Korea would win. The 2 best Korean teams faced off in the semifinals. T1 won that in 5 games, and they swept the finals. Okay, that counts. 2014, the Samsung Blue and White, we thought they were the 2 best teams. They meet in the semifinals. White beats Blue. White smashes finals. 2015 and 2016, T1's back. I think this is the peak of their dynasty, as I'll get in some other sections of this podcast, going a little bit more into detail about the level of dynasties that we've seen. But they win in 2015 and 2016. So I really do feel like for 4 years in a row there, that the favorites did win the World Championship. But then it changes a little bit. 2017, Samsung, even though they're a Korean team, upset the T1 dynasty. They beat Faker. Ruler gets his first World Championship, which is still his only World Championship. And then it's kind of strange for a few years. I think 2018 was really up for grabs with RNG winning MSI and there being a murkier level of balance of power between the LCK and the LPL. Then the LCK really falls flat at Worlds. We have the IGKT quarterfinal where then and Afrika losing in quarterfinals, so there's no Korean teams in semis or beyond. Just a really weird year. I think potentially one of the favorites won with IG, but considering China had never won Worlds, I can't consider that the favorites winning. 2019, technically FPX won as the number one seed from the defending regional champions, which would be the LPL, but they were looking pretty shaky for a lot of the year and a lot of that world. So, ish. I think 2020 and 2021, the favorites won. I thought Damwon was the best team all year, who won in the 2020 World Finals. I thought 2021, it was the number one seed from China and Korea, so there's favorites winning. But then the last 3 years, we're kind of back to upsets. DRX's Miracle Run in 2022. I think T1 winning is an upset. GenG was the favorite from Korea. JDG was the favorite from China. Neither of them won. Last year, T1 was the fourth seed. They were by no means the favorite. And then this year, we have a guaranteed upset with KT being in the final and then TES and T1 playing in semis. And you could definitely make the argument that T1 competing the three-peat when you're looking at this 5 years from now is like, well, of course, they are the back-to-back world champions. They are one of the favorites, which I think I'm willing to buy into that argument a bit. But the overall point that I wanted to make going through this entire 13-year history of Worlds that I'm covering is I think in the beginning, the favorites would win very frequently. But recently, it's actually much more uncommon for that to happen. And like, I don't necessarily know why that is. I think the gap between the very best teams and not the very best teams was bigger in T1 and Samsung's era, early 2013 to 2017. I think when vision was reduced in the game, control wards have been changed. There used to be an old jungle item that would just give you 2 wards every time you based. That was removed. That was when we started to see the Korean teams fall and the Chinese teams start to rise. Then I feel like the Korean teams kind of took back the dominance once they learned the new game, as we've seen with them winning the last 3 world championships. I'm getting a little off track here, but I was just trying to think, like, is everyone just better now? And because the game is so team fight focused, is it just harder to consistently show that you're better? But then point number 2, just how dominant this GenG team has been historically speaking, if we just remove the world championship. It's them and 2015 to 2016 T1 in my quick recollection of this, and I can dive in. I'm going to be diving into this more when we get to finals, especially if T1 ends up making it. But like, I think GenG's domestic and MSI dominance almost disproves the statement that it is just harder to be dominant than it was in the past. Because let's just look at this year, what they did before Worlds. So if I look at the last 6 months, 7 months of their play in LCK, what they called rounds 1 and 2, which was their road to MSI, which is their split 2, and then rounds 3 and 5, which was their Legends group, which was only the top 5 teams in the LCK playing against each other in a triple round robin. In split 2, they were 18-0 in best of 3. And then heading in to split 3, triple round robin against the best teams, they only lost 1 best of 3. So on the year, after the first stand tournament, they went 29-1 in best of 3s. That's absurdly dominant. They also won MSI from the winners bracket. And then you can even go back to last year. In spring, they were 17-1 in best of 3. Then they won spring and they won MSI. And then in summer, they were 17-1 in best of 3 before losing in game 5 of their finals. And it was so much, they were so dominant that people were already trying during the summer split last year to say that EWC doesn't count in the Golden Road, because they were just so sure that this team that had won spring and had won MSI and was dominating summer was just going to continue to walk over people, because that's what it looks like all the time when GenG plays anyone and it's not in World's knockout stage. It's just the most insane thing to me that they keep losing in these situations. Like, I was actually mad when I saw the result this morning. I try to avoid spoilers as much as I can, but I always mess it up at some point during the review when I wake up. And I watched game 1 and I was like, oh no. I watched game 2 and I was like, oh no, but they clutched it out. They won the game 2. I'm like, okay, since they stopped the choke in game 2, like, surely they just become GenG again. They become this inevitable team that has no weaknesses and barely ever loses best of 3s and is playing the team that finished third but was essentially the fourth best team in Korea the whole year. Surely they just win 3-1 because I always see the length of the VOD and I knew it was a 4-game series. And I just couldn't. The anticipation was killing me. I checked the results. I saw 3-1 KT and I was like, wow, no. Like that was my visceral reaction to it. Just because I have this, it's almost this frustration at this point that like, how can you be so dominant? How can you be the model team that everyone looks to for the majority of the year, but then never win Worlds? It just frustrates me to no end. Mid laners just watch Chovy because they want to be like him. AD carries just watch Ruler because they want to be like him. If Ruler plays Vayne, now I can play Vayne. If Chovy plays this, well, I can play this. That's just what happens because they just beat everyone. Unless it's Worlds. It's just crazy. It's just crazy. So that's my frustration is historically speaking, in the last 2 years, those best of 3 scores in regular season, they are absurd. 29-1, 34-2 is their combined best of 3 scores in the last 2 years, not counting the LCK Cup. I still can't believe it. And then before that, like 23 and 22, they also were favorites-ish, favorite adjacent going into Worlds. The regular seasons hadn't been as dominant, but they went 15-3 in 2023 spring, 16-2 in summer. Won spring and summer, lost at MSI, were still favorites in 23. Even in 22, they were 15-3 in spring, 16-2 in summer. They won summer, so it's been 4 years of this. That is so long in League of Legends terms. That is as long as any dynasty lasts. They've had they have the regular season LCK dynasty locked up. Like they won 4 splits in a row from end of 22 almost all the way to the end of 24 before HLE beat them in finals. And then LCK only gave away 1 championship this year, so they won that one as well, which is the 5th. I'm rambling because I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated that they failed again. But I want to contextualize how crazy this KT run is as well, because I'm seeing a lot of comparisons to DRX. I do actually think it's pretty close in terms of craziness. I think the DRX one, the expectations were even lower for DRX than they were for KT, but they were pretty low. So here's what they've done in the year heading into the World Championship that they now, DRX won and KT has a chance of winning. So point 3, how contextually crazy is this KT run? KT was 5th in the LCK Cup. They were 5th in rounds 1 and 2 of LCK, which is their split 2. They had to play a tiebreaker game or to get into the Legends group, which is the top 5 for split 3 of the LCK, what I'm calling it. And then they got obliterated in the Legends group, finished 4th. And then the only time they had a top 3 finish all year was in playoffs. So KT, including being 10-1 at Worlds, their game score for the year is 68 wins, 65 losses, which means before Worlds, they were 58 wins and 64 losses. But it's a little unfair just because the Legends group was so insane, having to play triple round robin against T1, HLE, GenG. But apparently they just beat GenG whenever they want to, so who cares? Anyway, there's the context for KT, 58 and 64 game score heading into Worlds, but pretty hard strength of schedule. So if they had a normal record, if they had a normal schedule in a normal year, I think they would have been like 55% win rate, which is still pretty low for a team in the World Finals. DRX in 2022, the year of their World Championship, they were 5th in spring, 6th in summer playoffs. So this is why the expectations were so much lower for them. And then the way Korea did their regional qualifiers that year is they still allowed them, even with that 6th place finish, into like the lower bracket of their regional qualifier gauntlet. The top seeds got to play each other at first to qualify immediately, and then DRX won their first series and then beat the loser of that first series to be the second regional qualifying team. But all told, they ended the year after their Worlds run 72 wins, 59 losses with a 14-7 overall world score in games. They were 58-52 heading in, which is like very close to where I feel like KT would be if the formats had mirrored each other from year to year. I also wrote down for KT, the thing that makes this, in retrospect is going to feel like, why could more people not see this coming? They did actually already beat GenG in that playoffs best of 5, which is how they made it here in the first place. And that was that was actually powered up GenG. That was the GenG that doesn't choke internationally. That was the low pressure upper bracket LCK playoffs GenG that they beat. So maybe it's been here this whole time. However, I will say that's the only series that they beat GenG in the entire year. They then lost to them 3-0 later than that in the same playoffs. They're like, fluke. Apparently not. All right. Point 4. I swear I'll get to the actual game analysis soon enough. You can click on the timestamps. That's going to be the point after this. I wanted to just think about BDD and Chovy and their arcs as players. I'm hoping to have Emily Rand on later heading into the World Finals to talk more about like the big history of BDD and more specifically KT. But these are just some like high level things. BDD, 26 years old. He actually had been on GenG and nearly favored to win Worlds prior to Chovy replacing him to then definitely be favored to win Worlds 4 years in a row. So the GenG curse is actually going back even further than these last 4 years with Chovy. But BDD, 26 years old. He won 3 MVPs, 2017 summer, 2018 spring, and 2020 spring on GenG. And he's a 4-time LCK champion. Chovy, a little bit younger, 24 years old. He's won 4 MVPs. He's a 5-time LCK champ, arguably 6 if you count that road to MSI first place, which nobody does, so 5-time champ. And then neither of them have world titles. Chovy has 2 MSIs. But it's just interesting. Like, I do think that even though BDD has been the underdog for so much of this year and has been the top performer on KT to really help pull them into this slot, he too kind of spent some time falling short of lofty expectations. The 2017 Longzhou team that BDD was on, I remember I was doing World's Top 20 with Papa Smithy and Deficio that year. We put 4 Longzhou players in the top 6 of top 20 players at Worlds. And then they lost in the quarterfinals. So, could be our bad. Might have been overrating them a little bit. But they looked great in the LCK that year. And we were just expecting the LCK dominance of the best LCK team to continue. But it didn't. They fell short. Both BDD and Cuz, after that moment, they were both on that team, kind of went through their own slumps and did their time on bad teams before finding themselves on what many people thought was going to be another bad team together. And now they're in the world final. And Chovy's in this other situation where he came out on the scene. If you look at that first Griffin team that he was on in 2019, that team was insane, man. Doran, who was still really young, and there was this whole big top lane controversy and coach controversy that muddied the whole thing. But Doran, Tarzan, Chovy, Viper, Lehens. Like, that team today would still be favored to win Worlds a lot of times. But doesn't get it done there. They were super young, super understandable. Also a ton of drama shrouding that team. He ends up dragging some poor teams to Worlds. But then when he gets on GenG, he really just becomes the world's favorite 4 years in a row. And as I've gone over, like, domestically, this last chunk of 4 years, he's been the guy. Even internationally, he's kind of been the guy because he's won 2 MSIs. But at Worlds, he hasn't been the guy. And I just hope that he can have a similar... I mean, I guess I don't hope that he has a similar arc to BDD because BDD went through some rough times. But I almost feel like that's what... needs to happen with Chovy. Is he needs to stop dominating so much in the LCK and face... This is another tangent because I just can't get it out of my head how he just can't win. He's not facing adversity in the moments where it's still recoverable. he keeps running into the adversity and the tilt plays in the highest pressure moments when mistakes are no longer allowed. But if he has like a whole year to screw up, never screws up until the end. And then he just runs that cycle back over and over again. It's just so frustrating, man. Okay. Let's get into some breakdowns. The weirdest thing about watching GenG here was they had this sense of inevitability whenever I would tune into them during the regular season. And I admittedly did not watch a huge amount of LCK. A lot of this is just paying attention to what other analysts are saying. I had that long conversation with Ox before the year. This was not the year where I followed LCK as close as I used to, for sure. But there was still a sense of inevitability around GenG. They didn't always blow people out in the early game. They weren't a team that would scale for the late game either, but they were definitely a team that when they found themselves in winning positions, they would close it out. And then also, in a lot of close game situations, they wouldn't make that big mistake. They'd only make small mistakes. So they wouldn't have massive swings in their games, and I think that's how they so consistently won all of those best of threes. Even if they drop a close game here and there, the other team would always make more big mistakes than them, and they were so good in lane, and they had such good understanding of the game, and their team compositions were generally balanced. I'd say their drafts were probably the most criticized part of their gameplay the entire year, but that's what gave them that sense of inevitability, is that they wouldn't make big mistakes, and that they would close out winning positions. So game one, they are in a winning position. Let's look at this. 5,000 gold up, 3 Drakes to 2. Mountain Drake is spawning soon. So their margin for error, for what it's worth, is actually gone here. But let's watch it. They one-shot Cuz because they had tempo, through the Fog of War. Very easy. At this point, if you are playing a controlled game, yes, you keep pushing KT off of this spot, but you've done your job. You've killed the jungler with Mountain Drake spawning in 16 seconds and Baron spawning in 30 seconds. He's dead for 47 seconds. Like, this is a situation where just this kill is enough to go clean Mountain Drake, get 3 for yourself, keep them at 3, and then probably also get Baron, or at the very least, get a 5v4 fight in the Baron area where the game is winnable. But they just kind of lose their minds. And this is in game 1 of the series, before tilt has been happening. And they've also been playing fine. Like, some things have gone back and forth in this game, but a lot of their team fights were really crisp in this game. Like, Duro was finding insane engages on the Rakan. Chovy was following up really well. Ruler was playing solid. But this is where it started to go downhill, because literally just that one pick on Jarvan should be enough for the best team in the world to seal the game. They should get the Drake, they should get the Baron, they should end the game. But this is what happens instead. Canyon just YOLOs himself into the turret. They should have flash timers. They should know Caitlyn has flash. You can't pull yourself into the turret like this. Down plays it well. He gets Canyon with the trap. The fight continues. I think BDD plays great on the back end to surprise them. They still feel like they can win this with their hands. But then coming up is like another play that is just a little bit strange, because sure, we can't necessarily get the soul, but like, look how low Ruler is here. No flash, no barrier, but still a person who can do damage to Drake. He can probably find some plants in the river, heal up a little bit, and as long as, with Chovy and Sion ending this fight here, like once you kill the Caitlyn, and most likely the Rumble, even if Keen dies, Chovy and Ruler against just a Yone with no ult and no flash is probably enough just to get Drake. But Ruler flies in with literally nothing. He has like 50 health. And BDD kills him. I will say, BDD did a really sneaky job getting Q2 on that minion right there to charge up his Q3. I feel like Ruler probably thought that BDD wouldn't have Q3 and doesn't have W, so that he could still just help with damage and make sure they kill everyone, and then they go clean up the objectives. So it could just be like this really clutch play by BDD in that minion that basically you can't even see on the screen. Like, it's so... there's so much noise here, but this tiny little cannon minion with a sliver of health, BDD gets his Q2 on that. gets his Q3 up, kills Ruler. And then from here, because the death timers are a little bit faster for the Jarvan since he's the one who died at the start, KTT gets Mountain Soul. And from there, the game is still pretty close, but like Mountain Soul, man, is so powerful, so they win that one. Okay. Winning position in game 1 messes up. Game 2. Again, like they ended up winning this game, but it was pretty close after this, and this was just really weird to me because this is another, I think, really good position for GenG to be in. Ruler is 2,500 gold up on the Ezreal. He's really carrying this game. And this fight even goes pretty well. Like Chovy was pushing up bot lane. He holds the flank. Yes, they don't win the flip on the Drake, but they still pretty easily out team fight KT here. They burn the Alistar ultimate. They kill the Alistar. Cuz is pushed off to the side. And then for a team that is so synced up normally, they're really on completely different pages at the end of this fight. Ambessa resets. Chovy goes back for the wave. So GenG is definitively 3v5. They don't have Galio ult. They don't have teleports on their solo laners. And then Ruler just like flies in. Like they see the 4 people that they're going in on in a 3v5. And I just think this is an uncharacteristic play from Ruler because he has basically a 1,000 gold bounty at this point. It was like plus 566. And no flash and no solo laners. And he just gives his bounty over to Lethality Varus, who then nearly carries the game from this state. Whereas I think the normal GenG play is from this state, they can kind of just take over the map. They have the Herald crashing in mid. Chovy's going to go clean that bot wave, likely since KT has to respawn mid lane. Chovy might even be able to take turret in the top lane. And then they can just accelerate their gold lead. They'd be like 3,000 or 4,000 gold up from there. Ruler's incredibly fed, and they can get an easy victory. Now, mind you, this is the game that they won. So this wasn't the backbreaker mistake. And I'm thinking like maybe after game 2, since they were clearly a little bit off their game, but they did manage to win, they'd be back in their comfort zone because you can have that like really stressful moment and then this release after you win and relief, and then you can get back to focusing. That was not the case. So really weird game 3 here. This was probably Chovy's worst game for sure. Prior to this play, he died to the original BDD Azir gank when he failed to flash the BDD Azir ultimate, and then like right after that replay gets solo killed again because he just took a really bad trade and BDD just easily kills him with 4 soldiers. That's also after in game 1 that I didn't mention that I think is important to point out. He had another gank where he flashed trying to avoid a Jarvan EQ, but still got hit by it. So there were basically 2 moments in games 1 and game 3 during laning phase where he flashed a gank and still died, which is basically the worst thing you can do as a mid laner, especially for a guy who's so dominant in lane. Like it's actually okay to die in some situations if the wave is in a good spot and if you maintain your flash. It's also okay to flash away from a gank because the team invests so much tempo in that gank and you can stop it with your flash and then you just wait the 5 minutes. But to flash and die is something Chovy almost never does. And he did it twice this game. Anyway, in this situation, it feels good because he gets a little bit of gold back. But I want to point out here, now we're in a situation where both mid laners are dead. It is 4v4 on the map. However, Chovy has no TP and BDD has TP. Now, every team is a little bit different with their communication. But in my experience, when there is a fight that gets postured around for this long, like this 4v4 at Rift Herald, as a mid laner against another mid laner, it is your responsibility to tell your team that you can't be there and he can. And that clearly did not happen here because GenG, they want this fight. They do so much to set up for it. Like Keen's Aatrox gives up a wave to teleport in early. Perfect's Cassante ends up shoving in the wave first. They're all about taking this 4v4. They're the ones that fly in with the Leona ultimate. They really feel like they can win this fight. But regardless of if you're winning or losing the fight, like once the Azir teleport starts, they're screwed. So I just don't know what type of breakdown happened here where Chovy wasn't screaming at his team that it's going to be a 5v4. Maybe he was and they weren't listening, but that just seems crazy to me. So this was a really weird moment. And this is one of the reasons I was disappointing is like this team that was so great. And it's amazing for KT to make it through, but I don't necessarily feel like KT did it by like beating the perfect team. They beat an imperfect version of the perfect team. They were the better team on the day, but who knows what team shows up on finals. So they kind of break open the game from this moment. Game 4 was their worst game by far. GenG's. They just kind of hard-forced fights all game with a Yorick. So by this point, things have already gone kind of wrong. The fact that Yorick didn't get an advantage on the Ornn. But I think typically with a Yorick, like you're constantly wanting to draw people to sidelines, and you shouldn't just be trying to force fights the entire game. Yet again, just around this Rift Herald, without any apparent need to do so, without any advantage accumulated, like they just group up 5 people at the Rift Herald. KT are the ones that are spreading and accumulating gold right now. So GenG is the one saying, hey guys, get out of your lanes and come fight us immediately. But where's the advantage in this fight? I just don't think with the team composition against a mid-game spiking Kalista Renata, an Ornn who's level 11 and a Cassio who's level 11, that this is your window to win the game. I don't quite get it. They lose this fight pretty handily. And then on top of that, they don't get the Rift Herald. They lose, 3 people? BDD picks up the Rift Herald, actually smashes at bot lane as well to get first turret. And since they have Feat of Warfare, gives them feats of strength. And they just totally slammed them in games 3 and 4. So those are the 4 clips that I have. I'm going to talk about drafts a little bit too for point 6. I don't necessarily think that this was a draft gap, but I would say, just want to make sure that this is coming on screen properly. Yep, good. I would say GenG just drafted to their strengths, and it ended up not being good enough. But their bread and butter, I think in game 1, would be something kind of like this, right? They could just have Chovy on Talia. They have Canyon on an engaged jungler. They have good scaling, good teamfight structure. And honestly, this was the game that was closest to being victorious for them. KT has to be the team that takes the risks with the Rumble Yone that has to be more aggressive and go in more often. And KT wins this through Soul. We've already been through that. But I don't think this was a huge draft advantage in game 1. I look at game 2 with Fearless. Again, GenG just ends up doing their bread and butter. They were basically unbeatable with Galio this year. Everyone's been banning Galio against Chovy. It was even banned by KT in game 1. In game 2, Galio's up. They first pick the Xin, which is a little interesting, but with the Wukong ban, I think it's a bit of a Xin Zhao pinch. So even though they're the first team, I think all tournament to first pick Xin, I don't think it's crazy because Xin's a high priority early pick jungler anyway. So Xin and Best of Galio is like a 1-2-3 that a GenG would play any day and be 29-1 in best of 3 with, 29-1 in best of 3 with, and not care. And then they rounded out with Ezreal and Nautilus. And the team comp that they're against is the one that's taking risks, right? It's Cuz's first Kiana game of the year. So they go, KT goes Kiana Rise. They have Alistar support, Rek'Sai top lane, and Varus AD carry. This one ends up being one for GenG. As we talked about, close game. But like games 1 and 2, completely just bread and butter team compositions for GenG, which is one of the things that makes me think that this team, nothing was going wrong for this team, I don't think. I think they were doing completely fine in scrims. I think they were not stressed going into this. I think everything that they'd been doing all year had continued to work, so they had no reason to change it. That's my read based off of how these 2 games went, where they're just slamming their comfort and not really thinking twice. Okay, game 3 comes through. This is where it gets a little interesting. So GenG are the ones that opt into the mid trade because in the previous 2 games, the reason the Azir Orianna was banned, like especially in game 2, is like KT banned Orianna. GenG decides they don't want to first pick Azir, so they ban it as well. But then this game, nobody bans the first one, so they're just opting into the trade. Azir, Orianna, again, GenG looking for more standard comfort meta stuff that's going to be in their favor. And they pick 5 champions that feel very standard once again, like Pantheon jungle, Orianna mid, they have Sivir AD carry, and in the 4-5 they get Aatrox top and Leona support. Totally normal. KT has a pretty normal looking draft as well, for what it's worth. Azir in mid lane, Poppy in the jungle, Cassante top, Ashe and Lulu bot lane. So the only weirdish thing, is that they've gone to enchanters this early in a series, which a lot of times you're waiting until games 4 and 5. But with all the support bans that happened throughout this, with like the weird Braum ban that GenG did early on, as well as the Bard ban that KT did in the 4-5, it's understandable. I do feel like this is a draft, again, that either team can win. So I don't think draft was a big story in this, other than to illustrate to me that GenG wasn't struggling in scrims. Game 4, it's a Game 4 Fearless draft. These champions are all weird. Only question here is that GenG banned Ziggs and Zoe, because this is the combo that KT runs that just dominates. But you don't need to ban both. Like, you can just ban one. But at the same time, I feel like they didn't really know, like, what else would we like to target as the blue side team here. All they really wanted to do was set up the first pick Skarner, which with the Trundle ban and the Wukong and the Nidalee being gone, makes sense. 1, 2, 3 seems very standard for them. Skarner, Lucian, Braum. And then, I don't know, they lost their minds with Yorick and Anivia. That's just, I think they probably thought Anivia was good into Cassiopeia, which it could be. They're both fairly similar in their range profile. And they blind picked the Yorick, thinking that it would just beat everything 1v1, and then never played towards the Yorick the whole game, despite being against a weak laner. But that was their worst game. So drafts, I think after the first 3 games, they kind of lost confidence in themselves, thinking that they can't beat KT in a standard game, and they went a little crazy with Yorick and Anivia. But those are the drafts. That's pretty much it for this series. Just a big disappointment for me towards GenG. And there'll be plenty of KT content in the future. I was still happy to see the KT guys win after the game, but I was just more personally frustrated with such a great team of GenG who will now never get the recognition for how good they were, because they can't win when the pressure is as high as it gets at Worlds. And that is definitely a part of competition where they have consistently failed that level of the skill check. So, point 7. TES versus T1 tomorrow. There's going to be a lot of talk about T1's dynasty for sure, and I just wanted to throw in some really quick things. I do find it so interesting how different this T1 dynasty is from the previous T1 dynasty. So this current T1 dynasty is running like 4 years. 2022 was the start of it, where they lost in finals to DRX, and they had won the spring split in 2022 with the beginnings of this roster. The same core of Owner, Faker, Guma, Keria has been together. Even Zeus was on that 2022 team. Now it's Dorian. But yeah, they won spring, second in MSI. They were second in summer split, and then they were second in Worlds. But this last, like, 2023, 2024, 2025, they haven't won the LCK since 2022 spring. Yet they've won Worlds 2 going on 3 times, which when I compared to the previous three-peat attempt by T1, which is 2015, 2016, 2017, they won 4 of 6 LCK splits and 2 of 3 MSIs, as well as 2 of 3 Worlds. So that original T1 dynasty, the 2015 through 2017 version, they were like regular season GenG combined with international T1. So this T1 can surpass the World's legacy of the previous version. But in terms of overall dominance, I do feel like that original T1 dynasty, to me, is still number 1. And I hope I'm not pissing off too many current T1 fans, but whatever, come at me, comment engagement. And then maybe I'll reassess my take. Who knows? So that's it. TES versus T1 tomorrow. I am a little bit crazy when I said yesterday, I think, that maybe I'm favoring TES in this series. I still kind of maybe am. But the pause that I have is just seeing how, unlike any other League of Legends we watched throughout the whole year, your ability to deal with the pressure of Worlds is almost the biggest factor of all. And that's where T1 has consistently succeeded. So that's the biggest thing the TES has to overcome. And the way they do that, I think, is the fact that they are very much the underdogs now. So it'll be the balance of being the last hope of their region versus, hey, we're up against T1. Who cares? whichever mental space they can get into, I think will end up overpowering all other forms of analysis, which is disappointing, but it's like the fact of how Worlds has been going so far. Like, it won't matter as much. Do you play Kiana? How do you set up for Otacon? It's kind of like, is your brain working like a human, or are you animal brain? Like, just with the way the pressure has been affecting these teams. So that's it. GenG, what are they going to do, man? I don't see how they come back from this right now. Because you don't want to change this roster, but you have to. So I'm not ready for that discussion yet. That's in the future. Thank you for watching. Please like the video, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you tomorrow to react to whoever's in the World Finals, T1 or TES.